capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I know.
Really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight we're going to continue on with our A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. We're in Chapter 3, and we will be hopefully finishing up Chapter 3. Looks like Shanika is trying to join. Are you there this time, Shanika?
I think I am.
Okay.
How y'all doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing good.
I'm hearing an echo on your end. Do you still have...
Oops. You know what's crazy? I tried to open it in the app. I don't know how to get you guys into the app. So that's kind of, it's open in my Chrome. So I'm gonna hang up. Sorry.
Can you mute the stream wherever you're watching it? Okay. I guess you're just muting yourself for the moment. But anyway, before we get into the book tonight, Amanda has been working on a very special endeavor. Do you want to go ahead and tell everyone about it?
I make sourdough bread.
That's it? That's all you're going to give them?
I don't know. Like, I'm still
How did this newfound talent arise?
I got fired. I needed something to do. So I started making bread because that's what you do when your life falls apart. You make bread.
Yep, it's pretty amazing. You know, I'm doing better at my job than I've ever done at any job. I'm getting paid more than I ever have before. I enjoy my work more than I ever have. But it just goes to show you that no matter how high you get in capitalism, it doesn't take much to pull the entire rug out from under you. So Amanda losing her job it's been a pretty big struggle for us. So with this newfound bread talent, Amanda's been starting to actually sell her bread. You want to say a little bit about that?
So, I mean, I haven't, it's hard to say because, like, I haven't really formalized, like, this is a hard and fast price point. Like,
that's okay.
I'm just...
Looks like Zen is coming on too.
Hi.
Hello, Trisha.
Hey!
Love the lipstick.
Yeah, I was just about to say that myself. Is it blue or is it purple?
It's blurple.
Blurple. My
like
favorite.
A little bit both. Thank you. I gotta turn my volume up here so I can hear you a little better. Sorry I'm a few minutes late here. It took quite some time for my computer to connect.
No problem at all. So Amanda was just talking about her new bread endeavor, and you were actually one of her first customers for this. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
want to show everyone a sample of your wares?
Sure. This is not my most fluffy one, but this was sitting in the fridge. Ah!
Is it crumbling on you?
It sweated on me.
It sweated on you.
Ew. Well,
it's a delicious looking bread loaf, nonetheless.
And
right.
It's got the sourdough knock.
Yep. Yeah. Talk a little bit about how you came up with your new sourdough recipe. It's a little bit different than most sourdoughs.
I use kombucha for the starter instead of a typical sourdough starter that's like wheat flour and water, and then you feed it every couple of days. When you use a kombucha, you don't have to wait a whole damn week for your starter to be ready. It's usually ready in like 24 to 48 hours, which is super slick. And it also makes for a really holy bread. Like lots and lots of holes in the sourdough, which I personally think makes it much more delicious and pretty.
Absolutely.
Yes. I love those. Those are for holding all the butter.
Right?
That's right. Little butter pockets.
So,
So, if anyone is interested in helping us out as we try and struggle through this more difficult time, we are starting to offer, well, Amanda's starting to offer bread for sale. So if you just message me
yeah, message
on
Zach.
on whatever app you're watching this right now, or platform or whatever, then I will relay the information to Amanda, and we will arrange for payment and shipment. And
It'd probably be a little bit because I'm out of starter and I need to make some more, and I'm waiting on someone to finish his next batch of kombucha
I will get
So-
going on that as soon as I can.
so I can make it, because apparently it doesn't like a very flavorful tea.
He just wants the straight stuff.
It just wants the straight stuff. It doesn't play around. So, yeah,
Are you saying that Lurch is no longer with us? Did you
Lurch has been baked. We'll make more Lurch. There's still a little
Lurch
bit
is
left.
eternal.
Hmm?
Lurch is eternal.
He is.
He will
He
live
is
on within
eternal.
us.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a little bit of Lurch left, but I need to like feed and split.
Yeah.
But
Gosh.
because,
He doesn't die, he just multiplies.
yeah, it's like tribbles.
Well, I mean, when he was birthed by a SCOBY, what do you expect?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, see, I've been brewing kombucha for about 2 years now. Pretty continuously. I took about a 6-month break somewhere in there. But it's all from the original SCOBY, and now I have many that I've split off and given to other people, and I'm doing 2 batches at the same time usually, and that's been a lot of fun too. But that doesn't ship as well, and especially since it's often carbonated, I don't really want to take the risk of, being accused of being a mail bomber or something like that. So
yeah.
that would not be good.
Like, I went with my giant bag of loaves to the post office to ship today, and they were like smelling it. They were like, "We could smell you as soon as you came in. Like, are you selling this? Because we want some."
See, and it's like everywhere we go now, everyone we talk to, they all want a loaf. So I think Amanda's really hit on something big, and she's really good at it, and she can make a very consistent product now. And I mean, not to mention, I have not had a bad loaf yet. So
Oh, you're kind. He's also
Sure.
really biased. He's very biased, so I would take more information from Trisha or Shanika
oh, thanks.
about if the
Thanks
bread is
so
good or not in a few days. Like, you know.
That's right, and Shanika was an early customer as well. So.
So
Well, you
But
said
I
it would
would-
be on Thursday, so it'll be here just in time for me to
right?
make a couple of toasted slices and butter them up and maybe give you a review on air Thursday night.
Oh my gosh,
That would
what
be
do you?
really
You
cool.
can make a sandwich. Zach's been making capreses.
Oh, I've had some of the best capresses of my life with that bread. That's been so good. I can't.
Fuck yeah.
I'd like to get more into like paninis and stuff like that because I think it makes a good panini bread as well. But I just have not gotten up the.
We have a press, and
We
we
have a
have
press
the correct
somewhere.
cast iron pan to
right,
make that
so
happen.
I could do that. I just haven't yet because I've just been loving the stuff I have been making.
But I don't want to monopolize too much of this stream and everybody's time when they've come here to learn.
Well, that's okay.
About
You
leftist
are
things?
Obviously, welcome to stay and
I
be a
know,
part of
but
the stream as well.
I have another round of interviews tomorrow, and I need to be ready for them.
Cool.
Because that's I mailed out bread and interviewed all day today. So I've been a busy girl.
Hell yeah.
So, should we just do an informal poll for bread names? Or
Yeah.
do you want to actually make a
Could
real
you
poll?
share it at the start of your stream and at the end of the stream, and maybe after I rest for a little bit, I'll come back later.
Okay. So, how do you want to do it? Just like a thumbs up in chat if you like the name, a thumbs down if you don't like it, and a heart if you super like it?
Sure. And I'm open to suggestions too. I just need it to be baked good focus and preferably ghosty witchy.
Yes. Yes, we're trying to
Trying to create
push
a brand.
the spooky bread angle.
Because we always rise to the occasion.
Alright, so I'm going to type these.
That should totally be okay.
I'm
Yeah.
putting that on there. I'm putting it on there. Zach was like, I'm not giving into this. I'm like, no, this is cool.
That's very good.
This stays.
I'm going to type into the
That's
chat
fucking
as you name them. So here's our first one coming up now.
occult bakery. In which
So-
case, at my display, I would put a Ouija board out and make like a bread pancetta.
Oh, a pancetta. I get it.
Panera.
Pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
And then also,
So hold on.
Oh.
We gotta come in with the votes. So everyone vote, thumbs up, thumbs down, or heart. I know there's a few of you out there right now, so. Occult Bakery, what do y'all think? Now's your time to vote. And you can say your vote too, Trisha, if you don't want to vote in the chat.
Oh, my brain's still trying to process ideas. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, nothing yet for Occult Bakery,
okay,
so we will move on to the next one.
spectral sourdough.
Ooh. Nice.
So there's Spectral Sourdough. So Shanika says thumbs down to Occult Bakery.
Okay.
Okay.
Bedlam bread.
Bedlam Bread.
Bedlam bread.
Yeah.
I like that. That's fucking cool.
I like that BB.
Spectral seems kind of cool. Okay.
Okay. I do
Next
like
one.
the spectrum sourdough too.
Spectral
Yeah.
Sourdough. Okay.
And you know what? You could even use that specifically for your sourdough loaves, even if you don't think
That's
that's
true.
company.
You could micro brand each line of flavors.
Oh.
Bedlam, yeah. Okay. What's the next one?
Hex aliment.
How do you spell
ALIMENT. It's a synonym for pastries and baked goods.
Okay.
Um,
So we got Hex Element. What's the next one?
Phantom Delights, and now that I'm seeing that like the fourth time, it doesn't have the same. I don't think I really like that one.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it's out of reach that you can't quite grab it.
Yeah.
Oh man, my dirty mind is like picturing, these big loaves, and it was like Moonwater Mounds, but that just.
Ooh.
That's kind of cute though. You might, Shanika. I don't make any guarantees.
Yes, we cannot confirm nor deny the level of haunting of any given loaf.
There's also, they're all double wrapped, so they can be frozen right away, and you probably will need to freeze them unless you are just a bread
Yeah.
fiend.
You just have a
Even
mega
as much
bread
of a
bowl
bread
for-
fiend as I am, I'm still going to have to freeze some of it because there's only so
Yeah.
much that I can eat in a day. Oh, goodness, I can't wait.
Okay, what's
This
the next
is
one?
Zach's favorite, ghost bread.
It's not my favorite anymore, but it is. a
Oh,
good
I'm
one.
so sorry.
Exorcism with your 666 loaf.
Yeah. Should make a punch card.
Oh man. Maybe start sending out some little sprigs of sage wrapped up as many with each loaf. Like, here, burn this first, baby.
I like that. Oh, you want the last one?
Yeah.
Ouija bread.
I like that.
I think that one too could do the board. I like that one too.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of fun.
But-
And it's memorable. That would stick out in my mind.
And it's not all over whatchamacallit yet.
And my thought on that was to print a Ouija board on every bread bag so that you could always have one with you.
See, I'm gonna make a stamp and stamp the bread bags once I get some sort of more stable situation.
Ah, Shanika likes the Ouija bread.
Yes!
No.
Alright, we may have found our path. Maybe we should ask the Ouija board which way to go.
Yes.
But
Oh,
All right. Well, thank you
thank
for sharing
you
that.
so
Thank
much.
you, Trisha and Shanika, for supporting us so far,
So
being our
kind.
first customers, and hopefully we'll
Thank
get
you.
some more.
I might come back in a little while. I just need to recover.
That's fine.
I've had a lot of emotional output today.
Yeah, it's been a lot of interviews for Amanda. She's been really out there pounding the pavement.
Yeah. But this week seems better than the last week, for sure.
Yes, things. I think one of these ones you've had recently is going to finally hit. I'm going to turn the fan off here.
I'm too fancy for the fan.
I'm much too fancy. I'm also too cold for the fan. I don't know how you so hot all the time. Jeez. Upcoming alert. What is that about? All right. Oh, we have an excessive heat warning in effect for St. Paul from June 14th to some other time. Okay. Well, that's fun. That'll be fun to look forward to. Okay. So what was it that you just came from, Trisha? What was the meeting that you were at?
The United Panther Movement Central Committee meeting.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
How was that going?
Good. Got a few things that they were dealing with on the agenda today, as far as leadership voting in Comrade Africa as the captain for Newark, New Jersey. So he's going to have a large hand in running the Hassan Shakur Community Center there.
Oh, very cool.
As well as bringing over another group of comrades that recently left a separate Panther branch and are joining us.
Oh, nice.
There was some really fucked up transphobic shit that went down a few days ago that is why they decided fuck this and left that branch. And we're like, wait a minute, yeah, no, we don't play that turfy shit. There's, so many of us who are LGBTQ in this branch. Come on over
Right.
here. And, so the call might still be going right now, I'm not sure, but when I left, Comrade Minnie was telling us about their experiences over there and like the sheer hatred that they got over the weekend because somebody else in leadership there being a straight up fucking bigot, and it's like, okay, that shit's not cool. Nope.
No, it's not.
Equality and equity across the fucking board. We are all humans. That shit has no place in a leftist movement.
Absolutely.
So, I'm thankful that our leadership was like, wait a minute, yeah, no, open arms. Come on over here.
Yeah. That's really great that they had a place that they could go to as well, where instead of having to leave the movement altogether.
Uh-huh. And, I mean, these are like comrades. I've seen their, they showed up and put boots to the ground in my home state of Michigan in Grand Rapids after Patrick Leoya was murdered by the cops. I believe that was April. I have bad memory, but I believe that was the second week of April when that happened. And immediately they coordinated with our leadership and all got together and went out there to help with that march. And so I've seen Comrade Minnie's work, and I'm like,
That's awesome.
wait a minute, you're a solid powerhouse. How are your own comrades over there treating you badly just because they're like, oh, well, we don't want gay people in here anymore? What?
Yeah, what the hell? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what happened to intersectionality? Aren't we all in this struggle together? Doesn't capitalism and patriarchy and all these other systems of oppression affect all of us?
Yep. Exactly. And that's what we immediately addressed it. On Saturdays, we have our classes for the Hassan Shakur educational program, political education. And this Saturday, instead of doing the material that we had planned on doing, we ended up going into a deep dive with OG Panther's statements concerning LGBT rats and why that solidarity is absolutely fucking necessary, and anything less is unacceptable.
Absolutely.
So we got to, play some videos as well as Chairman Jake reading through some of the written statements from like Chairman Fred and Huey P. Newton discussing this and going, this solidarity is absolutely necessary to our movement, period.
That's great.
And yes,
That's great to get that reaffirmation.
Yep. We figured the best thing that we could do was address that straight on, head on, of like, no, this shit doesn't fly here, and it shouldn't be flying with any Panther group. And so,
Right.
if anybody's interested in seeing that is up on the For We Are Many page. I live streamed that meeting as well. I've been live streaming our classes and stuff on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So that is up there for anybody who would like to hear the OG Panther take on actually being a unified community.
There you go.
So.
All right. Well, I think we should probably get into the book then. We're getting pretty close to the end of this chapter. Just going to go ahead and share my screen now. Here we are. Just a few minutes left of this one. And then we'll move on into chapter 4. And so right now we're talking about pre-revolutionary United States and how things sucked for the working class even back then. They were being squeezed terribly. They tried to have a rebellion. It was Bacon's Rebellion. This was kind of a precursor to the Civil War. Happened about 100 years, or not Civil War, the Revolutionary War. Happened about 100 years beforehand, and it was crushed. But at the same time, many of these working class people were quite racist against everyone who was not white. So, not a lot of good people mentioned in this chapter. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. So let's continue on here. Let me just full screen it so you can see it better. And here we go. As always, if there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the chat. Always happy to help people learn and understand things better. That's what we're here for.
The militia did not respond when called to put them down, and the governor fled. The crowd was condemned by a merchants group as a, quote, riotous, tumultuous assembly of foreign seamen, servants, Negroes, and other persons of mean and vile condition. In New Jersey in the 1740s and 1750s, poor farmers occupying land over which they and the landowners had rival claims rioted when rents were demanded of them. In 1745, Samuel Baldwin, who had long lived on his land and who held an Indian title to it, was arrested for non-payment of rent to the proprietor and taken to the Newark jail. A contemporary described what happened then. Quote, the people in general, supposing the design of the proprietors was to ruin them, went to the prison, opened the door, and took out Baldwin. When two men who freed Baldwin were arrested, hundreds of New Jersey citizens gathered around the jail. A report sent by the New Jersey government to the Lords of Trade in London described the scene. Quote, two of the new captains of the Newark companies by the sheriff's order went in with their drums to the people, so met, and required all persons there belonged to their companies to follow the drums and to defend the prison. But none followed, though many were there. The multitude, between 4 and 5 of the clock in the afternoon, lighted off their horses and came towards the jail, huzzahing and swinging their clubs till they came within the reach of a guard, struck them with their clubs, and the guard, having no orders to fire, returned with blows with their guns. And some were wounded on both sides, but none killed. The multitude broke the ranks of the soldiers, and pressed on the prison door, where the sheriff stood with a sword, and kept them off till they gave him several blows, forced him out from thence. They then, with axes and other instruments, broke open the prison door, and took out the 2 prisoners, as also one other prisoner, that was confined for debt, and went away. Through this period, England was fighting a series of wars. Queen Anne's War in the early 1700s, King George's War in the 1730s. Some merchants made fortunes from these wars, but for most people they meant higher taxes, unemployment, poverty. An anonymous pamphleteer in Massachusetts, writing angrily after King George's War, described the situation. Quote, "Poverty and discontent appear in every face, except the countenances of the rich, and dwell upon every tongue." He spoke of a few men fed by, quote, "lust of power, lust of fame, lust of money," who got rich during the war. No wonder such men can build ships, houses, buy farms, set up their coaches, chariots, live very splendidly, purchase fame, posts of honor. He called them, quote, "birds of prey, enemies to all communities, wherever they live." The forced service of seamen led to a riot against impressment in Boston in 1747. The crowds turned against Thomas Hutchinson, a rich merchant and colonial official who had backed the governor in putting down the riot, and who also designed a currency plan for Massachusetts which seemed to discriminate against the poor. Hutchinson's house burned down mysteriously, and a crowd gathered in the street.
Mysteriously, huh?
I like how he said, mysteriously, who knows what happened? That's funny.
That it's just a history. We don't.
Yeah, I guess no one wanted to really dig into it too hard.
Right? It's like we're just not even.
And shouting, "Let it burn!"
That's
Yep,
right.
let it burn.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Sure, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Shit happens.
By the years of the Revolutionary Crisis, the 1760s, the wealthy elite that controlled the British colonies on the American mainland had 150 years of experience, had learned certain things about how to rule. They had various fears, but also had developed tactics to deal with what they feared. The Indians, they had found, were too unruly to keep as a labor force and remained an obstacle to expansion. Black slaves were easier to control, and their profitability for southern plantations was bringing an enormous increase in the importation of slaves, who were becoming a majority in some colonies and constituted 1/5 of the entire colonial population. But the blacks were not totally submissive, and as their numbers grew, the prospect of slave rebellion grew. With the problem of Indian hostility and the danger of slave revolts, the colonial elite had to consider the class anger of poor whites, servants, tenants, the city poor, the propertyless, the taxpayer, the soldier, and the sailor. As the colonies passed their 100th year and went into the middle of the 1700s, as the gap between rich and poor widened, as violence and the threat of violence increased, the problem of control became more serious. What if these different despised groups, the Indians, the slaves, the poor whites, should combine?
Yeah. What if there was solidarity among different classes and races and genders and every other sort of dividing line?
They knew even then that if they fucked around, they were gonna find out when all of us unite. And that's exactly what we're still calling for today.
Absolutely. That's why intersectionality is so vital. We can't afford to just leave anyone behind. You know, even if you don't particularly care about a cause or the plight of a particular group of people, you still need them to be on your side.
Right. And it's one of those things that I've noticed, especially as of late, has been a delicate line to walk when it comes to even dealing with these things in conversation with fellow leftists, because we have to get past the shit livery of identity politics and to that intersectionality of like, look, without us coming together in solidarity and true camaraderie, what the fuck are we doing?
What are we doing? We're just gonna, divide and divide and divide until we are an ideology of one, each of us. And if that's the only,
and nobody gets anywhere.
That's right. If you only accept 100% purity, you're basically, a movement of one.
Right.
So.
We can't have misogyny. We can't have racism. We can't have homophobia of any fucking kind. We can't have that shit.
Yeah, there's no reason for any of that.
No.
Stuff.
I'm a human being. You're a human being. We're all human beings. Now, when we come together to actually deal with the oppressor, the fucking enemy state, and its supporters, okay, it's going to take all of us. All of us.
Absolutely. 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 Yeah. And, you know, if we ever hope to have a new system that enough people will support, we're probably going to want to at least have most people on board with that new system. Otherwise, it seems that things will just keep fracturing and there'll be more rebellions against, you know, even better iterations of what we have now. And, you know, we just risk backsliding once again. So.
Right. And I've seen it go in both directions of people starting to address things from an intersectional fucking manner, and some of them slip too far into class reductionism, and some of them slip too far towards identity politics, and it's like,
Yeah.
Wait a minute. No. We have to first and foremost acknowledge that people of color, LGBTQ, women are significantly more oppressed than others. But when it comes down to the class violence that's happening, that is all of us, including our white comrades, even those who are cis men. We can't have hate slung their way either.
That is true. That is
None
true.
of it is acceptable. We need to
and it's just counterproductive.
Yes, we need true unity.
Yep. Yep. Because as they were just talking about, they want us to be divided. They want us fighting these petty squabbles over meaningless divisions.
Yep.
You know, you keep on fanning the flames of prejudice. I mean, there's a reason that so many of these right-wing hate groups are funded by very wealthy people. You know, even people like Ben Shapiro are funded by some pretty horrible people who have a vested interest in keeping the working class divided against itself. And, you know, lo and behold, he comes out with narratives that are designed to further those divisions rather than make us see what we have in common.
Right? And as that paragraph just showed, they've known this for a long fucking time, and they have been trying to fucking cause divisiveness amongst the working class since the fucked up founding fathers, who I'd love to kick right now, started all this shit.
Yeah. Well, and it, you know, it shows that it goes back even before that, because at this point in the book we're still pre-Revolutionary War. So you know, in some of those wars they talked about, the founding fathers were not even born yet. So this goes back to as long as there has been a ruling class, whether that's just a regular monarchy, whether it's a slave state, whether it's an absolute monarchy, it doesn't really matter. As long as there's been one group that's set themselves above everyone else, they have known that unity is their demise.
Yup. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out too, because yeah, you're correct. This is pre the bourgeoisie revolution. This is still under monarchy, when you know, it was merely European colonies here.
That's right. Yeah, we were just
it was already starting of like, hey, we can't have people coming together and fighting our oppression.
Yep, and we're hearing in this chapter right now the seeds of the making of race, because, you know, at these earlier times there was no such thing as race per se. There may have been national origin or culture or things like that people grabbed onto as their identity, but simple, you know, content of melanin was not a thing that really kicked off until it needed to be a thing in order to keep people divided and fighting one another. And that's how the white club has been used ever since. It's just been a tool to exclude. It doesn't actually mean anything. There's never been a white culture. It's always been an amalgam of many, 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 many different cultures, some of them not even speaking the same language or coming from even remotely similar places.
Or even ethnic background. I mean,
ethnic background, any way you can name it. Yeah. It's been a very.
I mean, hell, you know, sorry, breaking up.
Yep, you paused it.
Go ahead.
For a second there. No, you go ahead. You were saying something.
When it comes to the human diaspora itself, there's completely separate tribes of people that settled different parts of Europe. Hell, even different
Mhm.
parts of specific islands. Like in Great Britain, okay, you've got people of English background, people of Welsh, and people of Scottish. Guess what? They're all three separate ethnic groups.
Mhm.
They're not
Mhm.
the same
Mhm.
ethnic group that just had, divisiveness
No.
under, other political shit. No, it's literally three separate peoples who inhabit that island, just for one example. And that's just one tiny fleck of
That's just
Europe.
one tiny island. Yeah. Yep. And so the question has to be asked: what exactly is whiteness? Because it's not an ethnic identity. It's not a set of cultural values. It's not a shared heritage of any kind. It really only is a tool of division. It's do you get to be part of the club or do you not? And as needed, members have been added to that white club. First it was I don't know who. Probably first like the Germans. Like I remember Benjamin Franklin was suspicious of allowing German people to be considered white because they were a little bit swarthier than the English people. And they of course didn't speak English as well, so he was afraid of their cultural pollution. So he didn't want them to be considered white, but eventually they were allowed in. And then it was groups like the Irish when they were at the bottom, and the U.S. needed them to fight against the black people that they were competing for jobs with. Then it was the Italians. Then it would be the Slavic peoples. Eventually, it's been much more recent that even Jewish people have been considered white. People of the Ashkenazi, the European Jewish groupings. There's a long time when they were never considered white, but that's a pretty common way of framing it now.
Well, it's a thing, like, as Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews were moving into Europe, Ashkenazi became born of basically intermarriage with
Mm-hmm.
Europeans who were like converting. And so it didn't matter if you had one drop of Jewish blood, then they were like, you're not fucking white no more, type bullshit. And it's all fucking divisiveness. I mean,
Yeah.
this shit even goes back to the co-optation of the word Caucasian. Caucasian does not mean lacking in pigment. It means from the Caucasus Mountains, and there are people of every shade of the rainbow from the Caucasus Mountains.
Just because one dude thought that the people from the Caucasus Mountains were the most beautiful on earth, that became the name for everyone who lacks pigmentation in their skin. But yeah, that's very true. And I mean, even today, there are groups of people that would be considered white by U.S. standards, like the travelers, who are called other names, which are out of cultural parlance, but are not considered white by a lot of people within Europe. Even though they're European, even though they have white skin, they're considered other. So, and in places like the UK, Catholic has become the stand-in for non-white. That's the dividing line between who gets to have and who doesn't get to have, who has to be working class.
Right.
So,
right.
So it's not a thing. Whiteness is not an actual thing. It's only a tool to hit other people with, primarily black people, but anyone who is challenging white supremacy at the time.
Right. It's like if you're any darker than milk toast, then they're like, enemy. And it's like, oh, come on. Especially when it comes to the really diehard racist ones that actually think, oh, we're the next evolutionary step. And it's like, no, you didn't evolve. You acclimated to your environment by losing some pigment so you could absorb enough fucking
vitamin D
in order to produce vitamin D, so you weren't fucking vitamin D deficient.
Yep, and that's it. That's the entire history of pigmentation is how close to the equator are you, and how much skin do you need to have exposed in order to get enough vitamin D versus how much melanin do you need to protect against skin cancer.
Yes.
That's it. That's the entire basis for all of these divisions and racial prejudices and all of these things. And it's so ridiculous. It is not based on any sort of good science or any sort of discernible differences among any of these peoples. It's just, it's the last vestiges of phrenology that have just refused to die completely. But yeah, and I mean, even coming down the pipeline, there's candidates for who's going to be the next group of white Americans. Some people think it's going to be certain Asian Americans who have gained more economic status through being able to migrate here and have the money to do so. So they just, on average, end up having more money. Some people think it's going to be certain Hispanic groups. Hispanic is not even a designation that's much used anymore, and because there's a difference. They make the difference between white Hispanic and non-white Hispanic. So I guess it just depends on who is the most useful group to smack probably black people with, and those will be the next ones inducted into the White Hall of Fame, basically.
It's all colorism bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, just comes back to trying to cause divisiveness, and I mean, for fuck's sake, when it comes to even how a lot of these racists in the United States view people from Central and South America coming here, and they talk all kinds of shit, and it's like, excuse me, you're talking about indigenous people, and you're standing on stolen fucking land talking this shit as if indigenous people don't have the right to travel freely on Turtle fucking Island. Like, come on now. But all it comes down to is like the ideology, like what Trump would spew, of just the racist trope of quote unquote, they're not sending us their best, and on with that fucking trash dialogue that I'm not even gonna fucking repeat because everybody else already knows where the fuck it went.
Mm-hmm.
It's such trash to hear from colonizers. Like, excuse me, what? The only fucking difference between who's acknowledged as indigenous Native Americans here versus white Hispanic or brown Hispanic in Central and South America is up here, the indigenous were killed and raped by other flavors of European, and down there, they were killed and raped by Spaniards.
That's right.
The fucking difference.
Yeah, it's what historic colonial power had the most control overall. Yep, that's very true. Yeah, very good points. So yeah, welcome James. Thanks for bringing up the breaking story. I think it's pretty. I haven't really even seen all the details of it. The story of the people that were pulled over in the U-Haul. Apparently, in Idaho somewhere, there was a group of Patriot Front, I believe it was, who were just pulled over, and they were in, riot gear, tactical gear, all decked out in their khakis and their same matching shirts with their patches from Patriot Front, and they were about to go probably murder some people at the Gay Pride Festival somewhere in Idaho, I believe. So.
Yep. And from what I've read up on, there's only one or two of them that were even from Idaho. The rest were coming from other states.
Oh, yeah?
Just to come start some shit. And I would also like to point out to everybody, don't celebrate this arrest too soon. First of all, the charges that they were hit with of intent to riot, how well is that going to stick? Even if they have accessed their fucking private conversations, talking about even like setting something on fire or going and attacking people only goes so far, because they didn't even do those things. They showed up and marched, but they didn't actually do anything that would be considered a riot. So those are bullshit charges. Yeah. And to me, it screams that the Fed is trying to pretend like, see, we're doing something about white supremacists. It's like, you're not doing dick. The only thing that might actually stick is the charge over the fucking smoke bomb. And even that's a weak one because it's a smoke bomb. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's a distractionary tactic.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, white supremacy just continues to rage in this country. I mean, several of the recent mass shootings have been committed by people explicitly trying to start a race war or trying to target racial minorities. It just continues unabated, and that's one of the factors that never ever gets brought up in any sort of mainstream media source. They may touch on it very quickly as a motive, but they never ever point to a broader movement that is somehow radicalizing all these people into believing it's okay to just take whatever weapons you can get your hands on and go murder a bunch of innocent people or children or whatever in the name of white supremacy.
That's the thing. I mean, that this whole situation is sad as it is. Idaho is very rural. Anywhere in Idaho, just about that you go, it's not even like there's, a huge LGBTQ community there, because there's not really any huge communities, period, there. Everyone is so dispersed and everything, and it's like, why are you so fucking hateful that you feel the need to drive from like a dozen other fucking states to come hate on a pride parade because the LGBTQ community there managed to actually, bring together a relatively small community in comparison to most other parts of the country to celebrate. We're free to exist now without, too much shit. Too much being loosely used there. But as far as like there actually being minimal legal protections and shit.
Yeah.
And they're like wanting to come intimidate and be like, no, we still don't fucking like you exist and we want to fucking harass you and assault you. Yeah. How fucking insecure and weak are those fucking Patriot Front dressing like a Geek Squad motherfuckers?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very, very fragile people with a fragile sense of their self. They believe that anyone behaving in any way that they disapprove of is somehow a threat to their entire existence when it's got nothing to do with their lives.
Right.
Dude. Hey, y'all.
Hey, Shanika.
Hi, Shanika.
Is the sound okay?
I can still hear an echo a little bit.
Okay. Sorry.
If you're getting the stream audio from somewhere, if you could just like turn that down and just use the,
How about now?
Headphones. Let's see. I think it's a lot better now.
Oops. Okay. I might have to connect the headphones. I'm gonna mute myself and try that. But I just wanted to say real quick too, like, how Zen was saying, like they're just y'all both saying that they're just fragile and whatnot, Geek Squad and whatnot. Yeah. It's like everybody who does some sort of aggression towards other people these days, it's 110% about how you got beat up in high school, or it's always something about their past when, if you were to like sit down and just really talk with people, obviously I'm not saying we should be so empathetic, but I'm just breaking it down to the point where it's like, what's driving it is you can't deal with what the real problem is, whatever that may be. Yeah. Like a lot of these people, they make the excuse of home life, or they're making tons of crazy excuses, and then they took a crazy left turn into, the answer is to kill Black people.
Right.
It could be anything. I'm not making an excuse, but I'm just saying, like, I'm always tripped out by the fact that, it's always somebody who's fragile beyond belief because they just can't own their shit one way or another. Like how many homophobic people are actually gay, for example?
Point that out. Statistically speaking,
a lot of projection there. Yeah.
Yep. The most homophobic motherfuckers end up being ones who are in the closet and with self-loathing. Mm-hmm. And they're like, "How dare you feel free to exist as you are when I don't feel free like that about myself?"
That's right. That's one thing that makes acceptance of the entire LGBTQIA community and their public visibility and tolerance and acceptance so important. because it's literally saving people's lives. Because
Right.
if those same people had grown up in an environment where they did feel comfortable to express themselves as they were, might not have gone the same way. But I mean, they're getting those notions from somewhere else too. It's not as though you're just born being homophobic or transphobic or racist. Somewhere along the way, you have to be indoctrinated into those sorts of ideas. Because kids that grow up together, you can put any random group of kids together, they're going to take whatever kids they grow up with. It's just the norm. Doesn't matter how they present, how their genders are presented, what clothes they wear. It doesn't matter. They will accept it as normal. So
Right. Not going to start treating others like shit unless they see somebody setting that example of treating others like shit for being different. You know, a lot of it's societal, a lot of it's family influences, like James just acknowledged. A lot of it's religious shit.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah.
You know, and especially on that note, excuse me, but if your religion is teaching you to fucking hate other people, you're doing your religion wrong. Not to mention the fact that, okay, even the ones that go in that direction and they try to, you know, quote things from the Bible that weren't initially there. The fact of the matter is that man shall not lie with man as he does with woman didn't get changed to that till the fucking 1980s. The actual scripture there says man shall not lie with young boys.
That's
as he does with women. It was condemning pedophilia,
right?
Not homosexuality between consenting adults.
Yeah. And you see all these religious groups that just completely conflate the two. They treat any sort of non-heterosexual proclivities as being the same as, you know, being someone who touches children inappropriately. So they just kind of lump it all together.
Yeah, look at these sick motherfuckers out there trying to call the entire LGBTQ community a bunch of fucking groomers, and it's like, excuse me.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
What? What's next? Gonna go back to the fucking bestiality shit too that y'all like to try to fucking claim? And it's like, that's a whole different.
It just makes no sense. Yeah.
No, they
it's just
shit and see what'll stick.
Absolutely. But it does. I mean, if you think about how many heterosexual messages you get on a daily basis, virtually every commercial has some element of sex to it that is almost always heterosexual sex. Virtually every movie has at least kissing in it of some kind, if there's any sort of romance in it at all. And yet somehow people still end up being gay, or being bi, or being asexual, despite all of those messages. It's kind of weird, though, that they think that just knowing about the existence of gay people, or bi people, or ace people, or trans people for that matter, is going to make the kids indoctrinated into wanting to only do that one thing and be that one thing.
Right. It's like, dude, our generation, our parents' generation, we grew up watching Bugs Bunny in drag, but now they're like, you can't go to drag story hour at the library, or you might be gay. And it's like, what?
Well, it's like, you know, how many gay children got dragged to an NFL game where the cheerleaders did their sexy little dance at halftime and still ended up not liking women. Yeah, didn't turn them straight somehow. So it didn't shatter their fragile childlike minds either to see adults being sexual. They either probably thought it was funny because it's weird and people are acting funny and adults are weird, or they just thought it was boring and they turned away and, you know, played their video game or something like that. Because normal kids who haven't been abused are not sexual. They just aren't. It's just not a natural part of their development yet. So they might be curious about it, but they're not. They're not going to be. Yeah.
Like if they look around and see half the crowd's like staring at the cheerleaders, they might be like, "What's their issue?"
Yeah. What the hell's going on? Why is this so interesting? Like,
Yeah. But you know, it's one of those things, you know, they don't see us coming at them like, hey, what are you doing grooming children for heterosexual sexuality with all of your blatant sexuality in movies that are even still considered PG, let alone like PG-13. What are you doing? Are you trying to condition them to be hetero?
Yeah. Right. Well, but then it even goes even further in some cases where they're like almost celebrating little kids acting as adults and having sexuality as long as it is heterosexual, and usually as long as it is little boys, you know, seemingly lusting after full-grown women. I think it was a Hassan episode I saw recently where he looked at some of these TikToks that get hundreds of thousands of likes and comments and all this stuff of, like, you know, a little boy looking at the boobs of a Hooters waitress or something like that and going, oh, and all these people are like, oh, that a boy, oh, he's going to be a lady killer when he grows up. All this really disgusting stuff. It's like, you talk about sexualizing children. Like, what message does that send when you're reinforcing something that kid probably just parroted because he saw an older sibling or a parent do it? You know, that's just weird, man. And then these are the same people that would throw that same criticism if it was, you know, a boy getting really excited to see the abs of a dancer, of a male dancer or something like that. Or, yeah, as long as it's not heteronormative, they're going to be up in arms about it. But as soon as it is, as soon as it conforms to their stereotypes, it's like, oh yeah, that's the way things are. Ha ha ha, he gets it. Ha ha ha.
And it's all fucked up.
Yeah.
In the words of Carlin, it's all bullshit and it's all bad for you.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, I hope I didn't miss if y'all already touched on the religion aspect of that, like the puritanical Victorian expectation and whatever, where because let's say Christian being kind of, you know, dominant and you know, the Bible condemning gay people apparently, like, I'm not saying it doesn't, I'm just saying apparently,
people
like,
interpreting it that way, yeah.
We'd much rather, you know, like, we'd much rather you got molested by, you know, opposite sex, you know, molester, because at least God can cure that. Or just whatever kind of narrative spins out from the Bible to the point where they go in the opposite direction, and it, like y'all were saying, with a little boy like looking at, you know, grown ladies' breasts, you know, and
Well, and along with that, just think of how many you see it, like every time it turns out that a female teacher has raped a male student, how many men come out of the woodwork to be like, oh, it's the teenage boy's fantasy, and oh, she's really doing him a favor, she made him a man today. All these really disgusting things that they say. And yet again, it's those same people who, if it was the other way around, oh, it's the loss of innocence, that poor little girl, he took advantage of his position, all this stuff, they would be up in arms in the other direction.
That whole thing, yeah. Like what I've seen, or not seen, but like seen, heard of kind of, is the narrative of the young girl, you know, preteen girl or whatever, and an older guy, and everybody's saying, oh, she's fast and she seduced him, you know, but then when
that's
it's
right.
Like if it's the same sex thing, like let's say maybe uncle raped or messed with a little boy, that's the first time we actually start kind of demonizing the act and being like, oh, he's sick. But when between opposite sex, nobody cared about the parties involved to that degree.
Right. We have a fucked up culture that has literally embodied these things to enshrine them in art. I mean, look at, okay, the first example there of older women with little boys, Mrs. Robinson. Let's go back a little fucking earlier. Old men with little girls, Lolita. And
that's a gross one. Yeah.
Seriously. And that is straight up fucking abuse. Like, I don't know if you guys
remember. That's right.
Like, the
fetishization
storylines were so fucked where it's like he would do shit like denying her food unless she gave him sexual favors. I mean, it was fucking disgusting. And that's the type of shit that people were just trying to normalize. It's like, there's nothing fucking normal about that. That is molestation.
No.
Dude, you ready to be real grossed out? They had this whole crazy fetish about like babies and pacifiers and stuff, and like some of our early, yes. Unfortunately, I have taken a few too many film classes, but they basically were like letting you know how the cute little kids were kind of a fantasy too, and there's like some of that went underground. Like I guess some people weren't really into it, so that's the only reason why it went underground. But this whole Weinstein and dude, like every one of these like crazy, off the chain people on their sexual proclivities and stuff, that's not new. That's like so old. It only went underground like shortly after they had sort of there was like a subgenre about like babies and stuff. And it was suggestive, but it was also, feeding into some grown person's fantasy. So it's like this crazy twistedness of, Christian and whatever, religious Victorian, perfect on the outside and like buck wild as fuck. You know what I mean? Behind the scenes where anything
they
goes.
Always love that's always the way it goes too. And they want to have, Mother Teresa in the streets. And Mary Magdalene in the sheets.
Go off, right?
And
all that.
It's just interesting as a society we've been conditioned to like assign blame to someone and just fixate on like we have to punish this person. This person's a jerk, and it's like there were two people involved. One of these people is likely traumatized, and the other person probably has some other deep-seated trauma that's expressing itself in this way, and
there's something off about
there's something off. They need help. And so to say both parties need help, it's like you're naughty and you're a saint. And it's like, again, I'm not saying that a rape victim is to be blamed. I'm just saying like we're not looking at this from like
we need to fix the whole problem in society. Not
just assign blame and separate.
Well, I mean, I gotta say one thing. Like, I'm a huge believer of the idea that they're allowing tons of child abuse to happen on purpose, because if you keep like, let me just make it as raw as hell. If you have a nation where you keep just breeding broken people that can never really stand up even when they're adults, and then when you have somebody standing up for, something bad happened to me when I was a kid, or this is an injustice, everybody like shouts you down because either A, they don't want to relive or remember the stuff that they were forced to like not get justice for, or they're doing it to their own kid. Just tons of that cycle is,
I can see that.
I'll be saying it till the day I die. Like they're doing that on purpose. There's no way that that's an accident.
I think it's at the very least, it's just a byproduct of the conditioning you get under capitalism to shut up, look ahead, know your role, submit to authority, don't really ever question things too much, keep taboo things taboo, all these ways they indoctrinate people into being good little automatons that work jobs and make tons of money for the bosses, can also be ways that people are taken advantage of, sexually, physically, emotionally, any way you can think of. It all kind of goes hand in hand to breed people that are more like you say, more easily taken advantage of.
I mean, this is literally how we went from colonialism to neo-colonialism. And for a simple visual of that, I saw the most beautiful example explaining this in a meme that was a cartoon drawing of, okay, colonialism, you have a colonist pointing a fucking gun at your head saying you're going to do this. Neo-colonialism, you're pointing the fucking gun at your own head going,
yeah.
Yep.
You've internalized it, yeah.
I can see that.
And it's one of those things that a couple of my other comrades and I were discussing yesterday, that when it comes down to it, a lot of the leftist infighting that we are fucking seeing, a lot of the division is Because we're all fucking traumatized.
Go off. Go off.
And the saddest part is a lot of that trauma is what pushed us left.
Go off.
And now that fucking internalized trauma and everything is causing people to fucking lash out at each other instead of unite. It's like a snake eating its own fucking tail. We're going in a vicious circle here because neocolonialism has taught us to do this. With that fucking gun and to fucking hate ourselves for how the fuck we exist. And
that's a very good point.
Causing our own divisiveness.
That's a very good point.
Right.
That's everything, Zen. That's the biggest nugget right there. That's the biggest nugget right there. Because if you're interacting with somebody who has, that mental gun pointed toward their own head like that, and you try to like wrestle it away from them, they go all deep into like some twisted sort of way in which they've reasoned out that they're in the wrong, and you kind of know that they've been living with that as their reality or understanding of the situation for so long, and then like there's no messages pressing against that message of like, hey, get help and stuff like that. The closest that you really get to something about like mental, I'm always talking about mental health, but seriously, the closest that you get to something about mental health is just fetishizing, Tourette's on TikTok, or, overblowing the definition of maybe autism or anxiety. Like, you get just tons of misinformation, and it's just in style right now. Nobody's really, not nobody, but like people aren't either serious about it or they're scared about it. But dude, like, man, I'm like shaking, like when that gun at their own head thing is scary.
Yeah.
Like I'm like sitting here like hanging out with y'all because I was like, damn, I gotta hang out. I didn't even know what time it is, what day it is. It was like, if I'm around someone and they're in that position, I'm an easy target, because if I say something that makes them feel a certain way, I don't even have to be talking about them. I can just be talking about something basic, and I remind them of somebody in the past, and now they're battling against me until, 6 months later, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I had this whole problem. Like, dude, I knew. Like, everybody is just projecting in a circle, and I don't know if anybody else going through shit like that, but dude, like, projecting and, oh, dude, that's why I'm like, go off. That's, ugh.
That right there, it's another sign of that trauma that is being healed, of people being like, well, you just reminded me of somebody from my past who was an asshole when they said something that you mean in a completely different way. You have literally given context that's totally fucking
different.
Football field away from what that motherfucker was saying, and I'm gonna take it out on you.
Dude, they won't, a lot of times when people get triggered in that particular way, they're so sure that you're toxic, abuser, whatever, that they're ready to cut you off in the middle of the sentence, finish the sentence for you, guess wrong, draw the conclusion, beat the shit out of you emotionally because they assume something. And then like, it's the same thing over and over, and it has everything to do with like, if you're not in your box, in your proper lane, yes or no, sir, in the way that you're supposed to be trained up in this nation, if you're just a little authentic, a little bit too quirky, a little whatever, and you're not like doing it for a virtual signal or whatever, you're just being yourself, like, people get fucking so shitly afraid of that. I'm like, damn, like, are y'all that? I thought I was the runaway slave, how I'm getting treated like the freaking, dark-skinned niggers getting stepped on by the system. I'm looking at a lot of zombies and straight up like mentally enchained people. I ain't gonna lie, for real. It's sick. It scares me. It fucking scares me, because I don't know if the next person I interact with is gonna be projecting in some way. And there's tons of little things that happen, like someone will have a behavior or an assumption, and I keep saying race, but like it doesn't matter the context. Like, if they're not resolving whatever is going on inside of them, this is how, like y'all were saying, like they're jumping up trying to hurt this person and kill that person, and these people have absolutely nothing to do with any of the things that's wrong with you, and we all know this. And then they use the term mental illness. Oh my God, that's the new buzzword, isn't it? Oh, this person shot up a school because he's mentally ill, and just leave it at that. Like,
Yeah.
That shit pisses me off too, because it's like, okay, even if and when we are talking about mental illness in those situations, we are talking about a very specific one of psychopathy.
oh my god, y'all are an oasis. I'm taking my glasses off, put my head down.
Everyone who has any kind of mental health issue with that shit, because you know what? I'm mentally fucking tell you right now, motherfuckers.
Dude, right?
Yeah,
But,
well, me,
you know,
I mean,
be
technically
going
me
around
too.
shooting
I have to.
Me too.
So yeah, and you know, if we're really going to be serious about mental illness as a cause and stuff, mightn't universal health care that includes mental health care be then the solution?
Never.
For real. Maybe if they had a therapist they could actually trust to talk with about this shit,
Uh-huh.
they could
Yeah.
deal with some of those traumas and issues and the things that they are feeling surrounding those situations before they get pushed to the fucking brink and feel like going and shooting somebody at school that bullied them and all their friends.
Not to mention how many people, I don't know if you know the stats on it, I don't, but a lot of people, they either make videos about it beforehand, they say it to people, they make threats beforehand, nobody does anything about
Right.
it,
Yeah, no one
nobody
takes it
takes it seriously.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
And Alyosha brings up a good point too, that if you're, you know, if you are mentally ill, you are much more likely to be the victim of violence than the
right?
perpetrator of violence. Like many orders of magnitude more likely.
That.
So
And that's one thing that I find fucked up and where it collides with the whole gun restriction debate and stuff too, because you know how many people I know who have not been allowed to buy personal firearms because they have PTSD from being assaulted, beaten, and raped by people in their past, and they literally need something to protect their lives because they're being fucking stalked by said fucking assailant for years, and they can't fucking get the means to protect their own lives. And I mean, these are people who I would trust with a firearm in their possession long before a lot of the motherfuckers who are pointing the finger at them.
yeah.
and you know what's really also tripped out? When they use that term mentally ill, they're not actually, like you said, there's no actual diagnosis there. But if and nobody asked for it, but I'm gonna say if I were to give a diagnosis of like a school shooter or something like that, right away I'm going directly towards now I can't talk shit. Anti-personal, I'm saying it wrong, but which is sociopathy and
Antisocial behavior.
thank you. Oh my God. You know, I get nervous. Antisocial behavior.
No problem.
And so antisocial personality disorder, antisocial disorder, whatever it's called. It's in the DSM. I believe it's in the IDC-10. So nobody's ever going to say that because anybody who has Google would quickly link that to, oh, you're a sociopath. Oh, you're a psychopath, which is a very different thing from mentally ill, which is interesting because people who have PTSD, something where you got something going on where you're not like dangerous in that way, like anti-social, but inwardly depression, anxiety, different stuff it's just difficult for you. We, because I'm one of them, we get looked at as, okay, I'm gonna, I'm probably dangerous. There's no, there's nothing that there's no proof of me being dangerous. But if you talk with me and you see me moving my hands jagged like that, it could be either that I'm from Chicago or it could be that I have a nervous condition or both. But that's when people start thinking, oh, she's gonna hurt somebody, And here's the crazy part about it. I'm saying it wrong again, the anti-person, that person, part of their diagnosis, if they were to be diagnosed, close to like, narcissism and stuff like that, that's a whole branch. Like there's 4 under that same branch, narcissism, XYZ. One of the great things about that is that they're so good at hiding who they are. So you're literally letting the people who are the narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, anti-everybody get away with stuff because they're never detected, but you're focusing in on somebody has a tic or somebody, starts maybe yelling you see what I'm saying? Like, they're not
Yeah.
even being sincere about trying to stop any of this stuff, because clearly the stuff that I'm saying right now, that would probably, I hope that would be part of the conversation if anybody was really trying to stop the shit, like the government or something, but they're definitely not going to go there, you know. So keep us all confused.
Matt had something she wanted to bring up?
Can you turn it off? It's too cold. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was just like thinking back to what Trisha was saying earlier about like the gun being up to your head, right? Like you're holding the own gun to your head, and thinking about like that she shared with me Ajahn Brahm, and I was just thinking back to his teachings about like the story he shared about the 7 monks, and like one of them had to die so the rest could live, but like you shouldn't sacrifice yourself because you're just as valuable as the rest, even though you have this most people I think have this natural impulse to be like, well, I would just sacrifice myself, it would be easier. I think more often than not most people would pick that option instead of saying, oh, well, that person's disabled, or that person's like mentally fucked, or this person doesn't have kids or anything, so like what's the point of them, you know? I was gonna bring up something else too, and then my brain just crashed.
That's okay. I really am enjoying this discussion, but I would like to get back to the text itself, because we only have a few minutes to go. We only got half an hour to go, and we got about 20 minutes of text to cover, so I want to make sure we get to the end of it.
Okay.
So here we
Even
go.
before there were so many blacks in the 17th century, there was, as Abbott Smith puts it, a lively feel that servants would join with Negroes or Indians to overcome the small number of masters. There was little chance that whites and Indians would combine in North America, as they were doing in South and Central America, where the shortage of women and the use of Indians on the plantations led to daily contact. Only in Georgia and South Carolina, where white women were scarce, was there some sexual mixing of white men and Indian women. In general, the Indian had been pushed out of sight, out of touch. One fact disturbed. Whites would run off to join Indian tribes, or would be captured in battle and brought up among the Indians, and when this happened, the whites, given a chance to leave, chose to stay in the Indian culture. Indians having the choice.
I mean, that alone should be pretty telling about how horrible the European culture was to be a part of, if you were not the lucky few at the top. That you know, all these so-called runaways would rather stay where they're at, living with the people that were thought of as savages, thought of as backwards, but yet somehow they were able to provide a better life for these people than these so-called civilized European colonizers.
And just one thing to point out there, a big facet of that is they actually lived as communities, a communal manner, a collective manner. Indigenous tribes were living in a communist manner before the word communism was even fucking coined.
Yeah,
and
I've heard it.
Literally is a matter of genuine care for everyone around you, which is the complete fucking opposite of this colonialist shit they were running away from.
And even people that weren't in the same tribe would help people in other tribes. They would exchange goods and services amongst groups just because that's what it is to be a decent person, and look for ways to support each other.
Sure.
Not like, oh, you're in this tribe, I'm not gonna give you any food.
I mean, to be fair, there were conflicts.
There was,
between,
of course. I'm
not
not
every
saying
tribe was
it
the
was
same.
sunshine and farts all the time, but I'm saying there was a lot more sharing than
But yeah,
now.
I mean, there was a lot less hierarchy in general. Like even in places with more developed chiefdoms and lines of succession and stuff like that, they're still only so high that any one person could rise, and you know, they weren't dependent on global commerce, so they pretty much had to get all of their sustenance to survive locally and on their own. So they all really literally depended on one another, and I guess that in a way makes it easier for people to appreciate that dependency, that interdependency that we all literally have. It's just we don't always see.
And a lot of that comes with the fact that even within tribal leadership hierarchy, there was always accountability to the whole tribe. For one, it was democratic centralism again before the term was fucking coined, where there was accountability, and you know, if there was something that was not approved by the majority of the people in leadership, it didn't fucking happen. You know, even when it comes down to like the war chief. Well, guess what? The war chief was only war chief in active times of war when it was deemed necessary for the rest of the community leadership.
Yeah, and in many tribes, especially the more seasonally mobile ones, that you would find that sort of a configuration where at certain times of the year, certain people held more power and held more sway, but in other times, things were more egalitarian and horizontally structured, and no one would, think, even consider, accepting an order from another person.
Right.
So, yeah.
A quick thought. Like, do you think that that's why the hyper individualism of today's America is, the constantly being pushed? Because it's like if you don't, interdepend and lean on one another, you can't have community.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, it's pretty much just on its face an anti-organizational strategy. It's making you internalize the capitalist mindset that people only rise by pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. Only individuals are to blame for their lot in life and whether or not they rise or fall. It is continually perpetuated because it keeps us weakened. There's no weaker position than being a union of one. Try and go and bargain with your boss just as yourself. You're not going to get much done unless you're a super vital person who can't be easily replaced. But for average workers who are seen as just cogs in a machine, who are routinely replaced without much cause or reason, they're reminded all the time how they should just be individuals and then not talk to one another, because that keeps them from unionizing. And really that is the only power that we can ever have as humans. It's collective power. Even the people at the top who claim to be these towering individuals would be nothing without the collective efforts of everyone below them. So there'd be no human civilization, no human culture. There'd be nothing if we were all just hermits who each lived in our own little cave and never interacted with one another.
Like, even outside of the workplace, I just wanted to say that I don't know how many times a day or a week I hear someone saying or see somebody posting how they're having a problem, which is a super common problem, but they're expressing over and over and over and over again how ashamed they are they have this problem, or you know what I mean? It's like there's just being alone with it all, kind of thing. Kind of like how Zen was saying, pointing a gun at your own head with the ideology.
And that ties in with mental health and treatment, because we are taught to individualize all of our own problems. So to ask for help is seen as weakness, which is why, especially in the US, going to a mental health professional is so extremely stigmatized. You're just seen as someone with personal moral failings that are innate to you, that you can never really change, or if you can change them, only you can change them through your own just force of will, it's all just bullshit. But that's how we keep people in their place.
It's sick. It's so sad.
Right. I mean, I talked at a previous position about like mental health stuff and like needing mental help, and that's an okay thing. And my coworker was just like, "Oh, why would you talk about that? Like, oh my God, you're like airing your personal business. Like, I just go by this philosophy of like trust no bitch." And I'm like, "And this is why you have
I just want to fight your coworkers. Like, tag me in, coach." That's bullshit.
That particular coworker, undiagnosed, but almost certainly a classic narcissist. Or was she actually diagnosed?
She was diagnosed.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So she had narcissistic.
She was getting a lot better at the end, which is great for her. I'm glad that she decided to seek help, but it was funny how so like anti getting help she was, and it's like there is nothing wrong with going to talk to someone, that's an outside third party. Like, don't get me wrong, I have a wonderful spouse.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily want to talk to him about every problem that I have because he's biased.
I'm also not a licensed therapist.
You're also not a licensed
Believe
therapist.
it or not.
Yeah.
So,
Like, you know, sometimes it's nice to have an objective outside
right.
source. And he's also got his own shit. So, like, come on. Like, get real, people. Like,
So basically what you're telling me is they allowed a diagnosed narcissist to influence and teach people with
EBD.
Children with behavioral
great,
disabilities.
great.
Yeah.
Yep.
cool.
Yeah.
No conflict there.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't a gasoline on a fire situation all school year long.
Yeah. Yeah. Somehow she managed to dump almost all of her work on everybody else, and her solution to all of these children's behavioral problems was basically just shut up and sit down.
Or get out of the classroom. That was my favorite. Take
Yeah,
them.
but it was always
Take them.
centered on her problem, her having a problem with them having a behavioral issue, not how can we help solve and work together and solve this child's behavioral problem so that they can better integrate into the classroom.
So some people lose their jobs if they get diagnosed with depression or a trauma disorder or some other things, but some people who have diagnosed okay, I'm sorry, because you know where I'll go with it. I'll drill it down until dude,
No,
I'm
no
sorry.
It's relevant, though.
It is
But
relevant.
it's just so fucking
Because-
like I literally have tears in my eyes and I don't cry all the damn time. This is some
I mean, it's like the same situation of, like, the rapist and the rape victim.
dude, right?
Both have trauma of some sort.
Usually,
One's
yeah.
just as more seemingly accepted trauma to the general public.
You know why I go off so bad? Because I try really hard and usually very much 99% of the time succeed in taking my trauma out in myself, not in like treating myself badly, but my brain and my nervous system and stuff, the things that I hold in, the stuff that I'm not doing, the
Yeah.
force of will, waiting, patience, whatever it is. And then if I raise my voice one time, you know, somebody's ready to sue me because they're injured by the decibels of me sounding like my dad. And at the end of the day, that's the only story that gets remembered. And I'm just sort of like, okay, I'll just, you know, here's me as my, sorry, I just.
No problem at all.
Right. And I feel like there's another layer to that too, though.
I just like, yeah, I'm sorry. It's like, I want to be quiet for a second and let you finish the book.
Yeah, we should probably move on. So hold that thought.
Oh,
Sorry.
you know I'm gonna forget it, so just go ahead. If
Sorry.
it's not,
It'll
there,
come
it's
back
not.
up. It'll
No,
come
it
back
won't.
up.
It's done.
No, no, me too.
I'm sorry for
It's okay. Just
destroying
cut me
that
off.
thought.
You're a white man. Be quiet.
Okay.
Be quiet, woman. Don't make me say
There you go, colonizing your own show, Zach.
I'm calling it my show, yeah.
Hey, I feel oppressed too. No, serious.
All right, well, now we're going to sit here and listen to some more talk about oppression.
Almost never decided to join the whites. Hector Jean Crevecoeur, the Frenchman who lived in America for almost 20 years, told in Letters from an American Farmer how children captured during the 7 Years' War and found by their parents, grown up and living with Indians, would refuse to leave their new families. Quote, "There must be in their social bond," he said.
Yep.
Dude.
Yeah.
Can I
that
just
says
say
something.
I tried to read this book when I was younger.
Mhm.
I got through like page 11. I was like,
Oh,
not today,
that
Satan. Can't do
that
it.
first chapter is heavy. It is heavy. It is one of the heaviest chapters. I mean, he started off with a banger. Like it, you can't look away after you've gone through that first chapter and just seen, hopefully, the upper limits of human cruelty. Yeah, that's a tough one.
You know, there's a second one of this as well.
There's also an indigenous people's history of the United States too. So yeah, I would like to cover all of it eventually. It's
I
incredibly
want it
important
all.
history to have out in the open and to face head on, because this is America. This is what we have been built on, and these are the themes that we can easily see time and time again. Virtually every time we stop, it's not that hard to bring the thread of what he's talking about up into the present day. And he even wrote this in the late 80s. So it's been 30 plus years since this book even came out, and it's still relevant today too. This is the country. This is how it's set. This is its default setting.
Everything that is in here is literally the fundamental bricklaying, building the bullshit that we live in right now that really fucking encapsulates patriarchal, capitalistic, fucking colonizer shit, imperialistic shit, the very worst that humanity has to fucking offer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're still living in its fucking shit pile.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it still has not released its grasp, and yeah, man, the neoliberal experiment that started with Reagan basically put a halt on virtually all progress up until the present day. We've had a little bit of wins here and there for human rights, but mostly it's just been an erosion, a rollback. Yeah, it's just been a reinforcement of that old colonial experiment.
People still want to try to praise him and his asshole wife with their fucking war on drugs fucking bullshit. And it's like, oh, you mean the white supremacy where they tried to legally enshrine more excuses to more heavily police and arrest black people?
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is it's not as though Bill Clinton was all that much better with his crime bill and his welfare to work program and his complete shredding of any social safety net but the bare minimum, never pushing universal health care, even though he certainly could have, even back in the 90s.
Yep.
Hillary Clinton calling black children super predators.
Oh, I remember that. Oh my God.
Right.
And somehow he's remembered as America's first black president by some people to this day, as though he gave a fuck about anyone. All he did was put a liberal spin on conservative ideas and kept that neoliberal project going. NAFTA, signing us into NAFTA, destroying any sort of trade protections that smaller, more impoverished countries might have otherwise had. Yeah. Getting us into countless wars that were just called military conflicts and stuff like that. He was a horrible president. Every president sucks. Yeah. APAB. All presidents are bastards.
Hey, Jimmy Carter did some...
Jimmy Carter did some good Habitat for Humanity.
I'm not saying he's perfect.
No. He seemed like an actual humanitarian, but even still, he was just a 4-year blip in an otherwise just tide of regression.
Tide of bullshit!
And march towards the fascist moment that we find ourselves in.
Neoliberal shit. Dems and reps are two heads of the same fucking monster, and if that shit right there doesn't show it, then here, let's throw out another example, because Joe motherfucking Biden, wasn't it in the 70s when he passed that crime bill that also...
The 90s, but yeah. Yeah, it was under Clinton.
Prison pipeline. And, I mean, he was blatantly fucking racist in the shit that he would say then, talking about, I don't want my kids to grow up in a jungle, fucking... What, motherfucker? Yeah, like, I don't understand. Seriously, I mean, that shit wasn't bad enough. That, it was left behind from people. But even during his fucking campaign, saying shit like, you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Excuse me, motherfucker?
Yeah.
I mean, how entitled can you possibly be to think you just are entitled to every single black vote in the country? Because what else are you going to do? Vote for the racist guy?
Though when there's people that say that sort of shit, I want to be like, can you expand upon that? Yeah. And then just not say anything and just let them keep talking, because it's like...
Give them enough rope. Yeah.
Yep. Give them enough rope.
Yep.
But you know what? Like shit like that. Like honestly, a lot of black people think that's cute or funny. Kind of like Nancy Pelosi and Kente Cloth kneeling or whatever else. Maybe
I can imagine.
Bill Clinton playing the saxophone. It's like, oh, isn't it nice? They understand us. Let's vote for them.
Pandered. I would just feel disgusting
The
if I was the
president
demographic being pandered to that way. Like,
It's performative trash.
yeah.
Right. They had Nancy Pelosi on Drag Race.
Oh my
and
god.
she was like, I know. But she was just like putting on like, oh, I really care about the community and don't forget to vote.
Yeah, you could tell that as soon
like-
as that camera cut off, she was probably just out of there.
Yep.
As fast as her $700 campaign contribution heels could carry her.
Yep. That.
Right? It was bad though. Like you could, there's like a clip of
pandering.
it online where it's like
bad.
Pelosi on
She's just trying
RuPaul,
so hard
and
to smile through the whole thing.
Yeah.
She's like, get me away from these freaks here. And they're all just fawning over her. She's like, oh Nancy, oh Nancy. Who knows if they're playing it up to get points with the judges, but whatever. The point is, it's an obvious performance stunt. What has she done for the drag community, for
Absolutely
gay men,
nothing.
for anything to do with any of that? Yeah, absolutely nothing.
Just excuse me. I'll be back. I'm gonna go take a shower. I feel fucking dirty after hearing that.
That's right.
This is by no means a reflection of how we feel in this house about Drag Race because
No.
I think it's a great show.
I think it's pretty fun too. I don't watch it as much as she does, but I know a lot of the drag queens on there, and I follow Trixie and Katya. And,
Trixie Mattel, right?
That's right,
Yeah.
Trixie Mattel.
But nobody's above criticism, and we kind of have to ask, why did you bring Nancy fucking Pelosi on your show?
Oh,
Right.
Why did you do that to us?
Right.
Like Bernie probably would have gone on and had a good old time and just been
It would have actually
Bernie.
been fun, yeah, because he genuinely likes people, and you can tell that he's not just like cringed out of his
Pandering.
mind to be amongst the commoners.
Yeah, right.
I
like
could see
Pelosi
him
is.
come in pull out a folding chair and the mittens on stage.
With his mitt.
Yeah.
That'd be good. That'd be good. All right. With that, let's get back to this text. Let's see if we can wind it up. Should only be a few more minutes here because I think the last few minutes are going to be his commentary again.
Said, something singularly captivating and far superior to anything to be boasted among us, for thousands of Europeans are Indians, and we have no examples of even one of these aborigines having from choice become Europeans. But this affected few people. In general, the Indian was kept at a distance, and the colonial officialdom had found a way of alleviating the danger. By monopolizing the good land on the eastern seaboard, they forced landless whites to move westward to the frontier, there to encounter the Indians and to be a buffer for the seaboard rich against Indian troubles, while becoming more dependent on the government for protection. Bacon's rebellion was instructive. To conciliate a diminishing Indian population at the expense of infuriating a coalition of white frontiersmen was very risky. Better to make war on the Indian, gain the support of the white, divert possible class conflict by turning poor whites against Indians for the security of the elite.
There it is.
Might blacks and Indians combine against the white enemy? In the northern colonies, except on Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Rhode Island, where there was close contact and sexual mixing, there was not much opportunity for Africans and Indians to meet in large numbers. New York had the largest slave population in the north, and there was some contact between blacks and Indians, as in 1712, when Africans and Indians joined in an insurrection, but this was quickly suppressed. In the Carolinas, however, whites were outnumbered by black slaves and nearby Indian tribes. In the 1750s, 25,000 whites faced 40,000 black slaves, with 60,000 Creek, Cherokee, Choctaw, and Chickasaw Indians in the area. Gary Nash writes, quote, Indian uprisings that punctuated the colonial period and a succession of slave uprisings and insurrectionary plots that were nipped in the bud kept South Carolinians sickeningly aware that only through the greatest vigilance and through policies designed to keep their enemies divided could they hope to remain in control of the situation. The white rulers of the Carolinas seemed to be conscious of the need for a policy. As one of them put it, quote, to make Indians and Negroes a check upon each other, lest by their vastly superior numbers we should be crushed by one or the other. And so laws were passed prohibiting free blacks from traveling in Indian country. Treaties with Indian tribes contained clauses requiring the return of fugitive slaves. Governor Littleton of South Carolina wrote in 1738, "It has always been the policy of this government to create an aversion in them, Indians, to Negroes." Part of this policy involved using black slaves in the South Carolina militia to fight Indians. Still, the government was worried about black revolt, and during the Cherokee War in the 1760s, a motion to equip 500 slaves to fight the Indians lost in the Carolina Assembly by a single vote. Blacks ran away to Indian villages, and the Creeks and Cherokees harbored runaway slaves by the hundreds. Many of these were amalgamated into the Indian tribes, married, produced children, but the combination of harsh slave codes and bribes to the Indians to help put down black rebels kept things under control. It was the potential combination of poor whites and blacks that caused the most fear among the wealthy white planters. If there had been the natural racial repugnance that some theorists have assumed, control would have been easier. But sexual attraction was powerful across racial lines. In 1743, a grand jury in Charleston, South Carolina denounced, quote, "the too common practice of criminal conversation with Negro and other slave wenches in this province." Mixed offspring continued to be produced by white-black sex relations throughout the colonial period, in spite of laws prohibiting interracial marriage in Virginia, Massachusetts, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, Georgia. By declaring the children illegitimate, they would keep them inside the black families so that the white population could remain pure and in control. What made Bacon's rebellion especially fearsome for the rulers of Virginia was that black slaves and white servants joined forces. The final surrender was by, quote, 400 English and Negroes in arms at one garrison, and 300, quote, freemen and African and English bondservants in another garrison. The naval commander who subdued the 400 wrote, quote, "Most of them I persuaded to go to their homes, which accordingly they did, except about 80 Negroes and 20 English, which would not deliver their arms." All through those early years, black and white slaves and servants ran away together, as shown both by the laws passed to stop this and the records of the courts. In 1698, South Carolina passed a, quote, deficiency law, requiring plantation owners to have at least one white servant for every 6 male adult Negroes. A letter from the southern colonies in 1682 complained of, quote, "no white man to superintend our Negroes or repress an insurrection of Negroes." In 1691, the House of Commons received, quote, "a petition of divers merchants, masters of ships, planters, and others trading to foreign plantations, setting forth that the plantations cannot be maintained without a considerable number of white servants, as well to keep the blacks in subjection as to bear arms in case of invasion." A report to the English government in 1721 said that in South Carolina, quote, "black slaves have lately attempted and were very near succeeding in a new revolution, and therefore it may be necessary to propose some new law for encouraging the entertainment of more white servants in the future. The military of this province does not consist of above 2,000 men." Apparently, 2,000 were not considered sufficient to meet the threat. This fear may help explain why Parliament in 1717 made transportation to the New World a legal punishment for crime. After that, tens of thousands of convicts would be sent to Virginia, Maryland, and other colonies. It also makes understandable why the Virginia Assembly, after Bacon's rebellion, gave amnesty to white servants who had rebelled, but not to blacks. Negroes were forbidden to carry any arms, while whites, finishing their servitude, would get muskets, along with corn and cash. The distinctions of status between white and black servants became more and more clear. In the 1720s, with fear of slave rebellion growing, white servants were allowed in Virginia to join the militia as substitutes for white freemen. At the same time, slave patrols were established in Virginia to deal with the, quote, "great dangers that may happen by the insurrections of Negroes." Poor white men would make up the rank and file of those patrols and get the monetary reward. Racism was becoming more and more practical. Edmund Morgan, on the basis of his careful study of slavery in Virginia, sees racism not as a natural to black-white difference, but something coming out of class scorn, a realistic device for control. Quote, if Freeman with disappointed hopes might be worse than anything Bacon had done, the answer to the problem, obvious if unspoken and only gradually realized, was racism. To separate dangerous free whites from dangerous black slaves by a screen of racial contempt.
So here we have the intentionality of racism coming in finally. It being a systematic program to keep them separated. Because they felt, I mean, they literally were vastly outnumbered, and they feared that. It's kind of reminds me of that scene in A Bug's Life, where the grasshoppers, who are few but fearsome, are talking amongst themselves, and the leader like throws a piece of corn or seed or whatever at one of the other grasshoppers and says, "Hey, did that hurt?" And the guy says, "Oh, no," and then he unleashes the whole mass of the seeds, and that's supposed to show that the power of the many against a individually more powerful few. And his conclusion was, if one rises up, they all might rise up. So that's why we got to keep them in control. It's not even about the food. It's not about anything other than a system of control. So here we have that in real form being plotted and carried out by pre-colonial or pre-revolutionary Americans.
I shouldn't laugh at this because you use that reference a lot.
I mean, it had a big effect on
Bugs
me
Life.
when I first saw it.
Sorry.
When did that movie come out? It'd be interesting to know.
Early 2000s, late 90s.
Oh.
98, yep. Yeah, so I would have been in high school or whatever, and yeah, had a big effect on my impressionable young mind. All right, I guess we can move on and just kind of finish it out.
There was still another control which became handy as the colonies grew, and which had crucial consequences for the continued rule of the elite throughout American history. Along with the very rich and the very poor, there developed a white middle class of small planters, independent farmers, city artisans who, given small rewards for joining forces with merchants and planters, would be a solid buffer against black slaves, frontier Indians, and very poor whites.
Isn't it interesting that especially the Democrats are always going on and on about strengthening the middle class, the deteriorating middle class, the plight of the middle class. They almost never talk about working class anymore. It's always the middle class. I wonder why they're so obsessed with the middle class. It's almost as though they serve that same purpose today. It's just that we don't have frontiers or anything. But they want to be buffered against those that they find distasteful and dirty and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like now that you've set that paradigm out there, from Howard Zinn, I'm going to be seeing that everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Straight up.
Oh yeah. Always talking about the sacred middle class. So they're just salt of the earth. I mean, and it ties into the more recent version of the American dream of owning the home and the car and the white picket fence and all very material. The original American dream, by the way, was the idea that no matter where you come from in the world, no matter your socioeconomic background, the language you speak, doesn't matter any sort of division. If you come to America and you work hard, you can make it. That was the original American dream. And somehow it got morphed into this consumer-driven, if you have this stuff, then you've made it. And it just happens to fit nicely with the narrative of this noble middle class in their suburban, single-family detached homes, just being the moral upholders of the entire country.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, always.
It's kind of, so it sounds like there's part of that where they're constantly moving the goalposts. So you're supposed to aim for, today it's like if TV is showing you TikTok or whatever, it's showing you, bands of money or whatever type of, lifestyles of rich and famous. So The moving of the goalposts, I can see that part, but I'm still trying to see, comprehend, detect the buffering parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Black Lives Matter would be a good example of this. Look at the playouts of how Black Lives Matter has been received by the public.
Right.
It now enjoys popular support, but especially at the beginning, it was very much opposed by Middle America. They would go on and on about, oh, how come football man gotta protest this way? How come they gotta block traffic to make their point? You know, they'd always nitpick the way that the message was delivered, so that they'd always have to be able to avoid actually confronting what the message was.
Right.
But they didn't even do all their research at first before they got all pissed off that he like took a knee.
Well,
They didn't
yeah,
realize
it's
that
his
he had
reaction.
written a letter to ask what would be the best way to be respectful but while still holding his
Right.
ground.
Because they don't care about that part. All they care about
But that's
is
bullshit.
the theatrical. Well, of course it's bullshit, but I'm just showing how that middle class is still used as a buffer from criticism. Because then we can spend all of this social capital, all this airtime and all this debating, is this appropriate? Is that the real reason he did it? Oh, did he have a point?
Right.
So
Looks like there's-
they
sorry.
absorbed the blow of that the movement was striking against the system by deflecting it, and the middle class eats it up.
That's the thing. So that's the thing that, like, yeah, because it's kind of
Yes.
like some stuff is hard for me to understand just
No
as a
problem.
newbie to all of this,
Sure.
because I know that I need to know the dynamics between things, like the meta space of the thing. So you're talking about, you're pointing out the issue behind the issue, the distraction from the issue, the distraction from the
Absolutely.
distraction from the distraction, you know,
Yeah.
type of,
Right.
wow. Oof. Man.
Yeah. But isn't it funny how it's still used in the same way as they originally had conceived of it as? It's just instead of frontier savages as they were thought of, they're being buffered against the working class poor. The burger flippers. Look at how much middle class buys into the idea that if you work hard, you'll be able to have these nice things, this house, this car, and stuff. So that must mean that people that don't have that just aren't working hard enough. The entire idea that the poor are lazy and just unambitious, and that's the reason they're poor. The middle class perpetuates that stuff continuously because they feel precarious too. Many of them have fought very hard to get to where they're at. They've climbed the corporate ladder. They've, actually, oftentimes they've just been in the right place in the right time. But still, they see themselves as having achieved something, and so they want to buy into the system that they feel has rewarded them for their hard work. And so
Yeah.
anything that's a threat to that system, they're going to attack just instinctively. And that's really good for the people that really benefit the most from that system. Because they're not even thinking about those people then.
Dude, everybody is fucked. Everybody's so mentally brainwashed. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not mentally brainwashed, it's either because you took steps to correct yourself or you just haven't been plugged into like the outpouring of this kind of thing. Because
Well,
anyway, I don't want to deter you more. I just
No,
sort
no,
of
no,
like,
that's fine. And the thing is, all of us internalize that. I feel proud now that I'm working at a job where I'm making more money than I ever have before, where I'm in a position where I don't, right now I'm the only person in the gardening department, but eventually I will have people working underneath me. There is a part of me that feels a lot of pride in that, and how I've worked to build myself up in my company. And while that may be true, at the same time, the owner of that company, as hard as he works, and he works, a 5-day week. I don't think he's ever come in on a weekend that I've been aware of, but he comes in, he does his time. I'm sure he's doing very important things, but he certainly benefits the most from my labor. And I've seen it because I do the bidding for a lot of the contracts that we have. I've seen where the numbers go and who they support and how we do things in order to have a certain percentage of profit.
yeah.
And part of that profit goes to overhead. It's called overhead.
Yeah.
And that's just for support staff. So like the lady that works the front desk, renting of the building, all the stuff that keeps the lights on and keeps us all being able to do our jobs. And that's all very important stuff too. But then there's this other part of the profit, and it's kind of unclear where that part goes. The balance sheets don't say it expressly, but it goes to the owner, when he had very little to do with any point of that process.
For sure.
Oftentimes does not even know, I don't know if he ever knows what projects I'm working on unless he's heard it from somebody else. But he's not out there making contacts, he's not out there developing connections, he's not out there bidding. I don't know that he bids any contracts at all. So as much as I feel good about my position helps a lot more the people that own, or the guy who owns the company, because it's all owned by one dude.
Definitely.
Even the vice president works very hard and works directly with clients and stuff like that. But I've never once seen the owner at a job site. Never once heard about any project that he's working on.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that way.
Capitalism.
Yep. And that's the system. And we get indoctrinated into that even when we know better. Like I literally know better, but you better believe that it makes me swell with pride if my boss says I've done a good job. Or that it's been great that I've pulled in so much money into the company, which is mostly to the boss. Because it's just part of us. It's ingrained into us to the point where it's not even a voluntary reflex anymore.
Well, it looks like they've done a great job of stripping us of so many things that, they basically brainwashed the entire population into thinking that whatever happened to them is their fault. So any little cookie or pat on the head that they give you after that is going to feel like a real shot of whatever to your soul, your spirit, your mind, and everything. And that's kind of like a big huge part of it, because they're the ones who made you have to work the way that you have to, or sacrifice whatever, like the whole game being rigged.
Right. Yeah. And look at all that effort that we put into this sort of thing, to, comparing ourselves to others, trying to do a good job at our place of work, trying to get ahead, all this sort of thing, all this mental and physical and emotional energy we pour into that. How much of that energy comparatively, think of any job you've ever had that wasn't working for yourself.
Yeah.
How much time have you spent thinking about the owner of that company? Did you even know who that owner was? I can tell you, when I worked for I've worked for Target, I've worked for Dairy Queen, I've worked for Panera Bread. I don't think I even know any of the owners at any time of any of those companies.
Oh, right.
But I knew my boss at the local Panera place. I knew all my coworkers and the struggles they went through. I put a ton of effort into thinking about those challenges and those struggles, and zero thought into the person who benefits the most. I couldn't name a person on the board of directors of any of those companies. And I would doubt that any of us could when it comes to these larger companies. And that's by design. It just is. That is what the middle class being a buffer is all about. Because you're just concentrating on you getting yours rather than us all getting ours.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you don't trust anybody, or nobody trusts anybody, because we're already indoctrinated that, everybody's out to get you, and some people are, and nobody understands you, and this is that, and I'm all by myself, blah, 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 blah.
Yep. Law of the jungle sort of thing. Yeah. Let's take just a minute to think about that as we wind up the last couple minutes here, though, because I really want to get through this one chapter just a little bit more.
The growing cities generated more skilled workers, and the governments cultivated the support of white mechanics by protecting them from the competition of both slaves and free Negroes. As early as 1686, the council in New York ordered that, quote, no Negro or slave be suffered to work on the bridge as a porter about any goods either imported or exported from or into this city. In the southern towns, too, white craftsmen and traders were protected from Negro competition. In 1764, the South Carolina legislature prohibited Charleston masters from employing Negroes or other slaves as mechanics or in handicraft trades. Middle-class Americans might be invited to join a new elite by attacks against the corruption of the established rich. The New Yorker, called Cadwalader Colden in his Address to the Freeholders in 1747, attacked the wealthy as tax dodgers unconcerned with the welfare of others, although he himself was wealthy, and spoke for the honesty and dependability of, quote, the middling rank of mankind, in whom citizens could best trust, quote, our liberty and property. This was to become a critically important rhetorical device for the rule of the few, who would speak to the many of our liberty, our property, our country. Similarly, in Boston, the rich James Otis could appeal to the Boston middle class by attacking the Tory Thomas Hutchinson. James Henretta has shown that while it was the rich who ruled Boston, there were political jobs available for the moderately well-off, as cullers of staves, measurer of coal baskets, fence viewer. Aubrey Land found in Maryland a class of small planters who were not, quote, the beneficiary of the planting society as the rich were, but who had the distinction of being called planters, and who were, quote, respectable citizens with community obligations to act as overseers of roads, appraisers of estates, and similar duties. It helped the Alliance to accept the middle class socially in, quote, a round of activities that included local politics, dances, horse racing, and cockfights, occasionally punctuated with drinking brawls. The Pennsylvania Journal wrote in 1756, quote, the people of this province are generally of the middling sort, and at present pretty much upon a level. They are chiefly industrious farmers, artificers, or men in trade. They enjoy and are fond of freedom, and the meanest among them thinks he has a right to civility from the greatest. Indeed, there was a substantial middle class fitting that description. To call them the people was to omit black slaves, white servants, displaced Indians, and the term middle class concealed a fact long true about this country that, as Richard Hofstadter said, quote, it was a middle class society governed for the most part by its upper classes. Those upper classes, to rule, needed to make concessions to the middle class without damage to their own wealth or power, at the expense of slaves, Indians, and poor whites. This bought loyalty. And to bind that loyalty with something more powerful even than material advantage, the ruling group found, in the 1760s and 1770s, a wonderfully useful device. That device was the language of liberty and equality, which could unite just enough whites to fight a revolution against England without ending either slavery or inequality. Thus ends Chapter 3 of A People's History of the United States. There are a few things
Okay. So yeah, that's, you still hear that same language today. You know, they talk about our country, our freedom, our equality, and stuff like that, but it's only for the right people.
So I'm going to Mexico. Viva la raza, yo voy a visitar a Mexico otra vez. Nah, man, I'm good. Whoa, I needed to hear this bad.
Yeah.
Yep. Incredibly appropriate, seething criticism of this fucking white supremacist, capitalistic, patriarchal fucking bullshit, colonizer shit.
Yep.
Hey,
So-
y'all, can I tell y'all something? Y'all
Sure.
podcast right here with the way you're doing things, it's like therapy, but not therapy like personal therapy, but it's like some sort of
Sociological
it's like
therapy.
you're say what?
Sociological therapy.
Pretty much like you're unbrainwashing me. Like I don't know if I was completely brainwashed or anything, but I'm here to make sure or to know, you know. And I'm like nice and uncomfortable, you know, wanting to cry. This is exactly why I need to be. This is what exactly people need to be hearing, for real.
Yeah, these are uncomfortable truths to face, for sure.
Hey, those are the ones I like.
Yeah, I mean, even for people that want to change this system and want to use the knowledge from the patterns that just keep repeating from this country time and time again to eventually break that cycle, it's still really hard to hear.
Things that, you know, as people hear these words from Howard Zinn It's like you can literally see any remnants left of patriotism and American exceptionalism leaving their body like they just got fucking exercised.
Well, that's the best kind of exorcism. Exorcising you of your bullshit mythology that has only sought to and been used to reinforce the rule by the few at the expense of everybody else. So,
Wow.
yeah. But yeah, we're seeing in the end of this chapter how we're being set up to have Zin show us exactly how this American Revolution was not at all what it's been made out to be, as though it was just the people spontaneously rising up against a tyrannical king and throwing off their chains. He's showing already that it's more than that, a bunch of rich people who want to enjoy even more privilege and just kick out the guy who is also then, extracting from them.
Goodness.
So that they can become the extractors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just keep dividing.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's a bourgeois revolution. Very well said, Tricia.
Yeah.
That is the American Revolution. For all of its supposed glory and noble principles and soaring rhetoric and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm gonna go, but I was gonna say the fact that all these were laws, like actual laws and practices earlier on that were there, and clearly I'm sure no one really knows about this stuff until they really, study it. But the fact that that was actually done on purpose, later on, a lot of people seem to assume that, it just happened a certain way because. So not only do they do stuff on purpose, they also feed you a lie to cover up what you thought happened. Like it's deep, and they're doing it on purpose. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Nobody's really holding them to the extent of the depth.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I was so excited to interject. That's the thing, is that once these systems get set into motion, it doesn't even require anyone to be doing it intentionally. All they have to intend to do is perpetuate things as they are. So they might not even know that they're perpetuating white supremacy or settler colonialism or any of these processes of exploitation. They just know that they like things how they are, and they want to keep things the way they are. So if people are speaking against the system, it's like they're speaking against them personally. They're feeling personally attacked. So they don't even have to be racist, homophobic, xenophobic, any of these things personally to still benefit from and continue to try and uphold a system that is all of those things.
Oh my God. Dude, if Mindfuck was a country. Yeah. I'm gonna have to take 5. I'm gonna have to let y'all go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a lot to ponder. So, but I really appreciate you coming along on this journey with us. It's been really great to have you popping into these shows. So
Thank you.
Just wanted to say that before you took off here tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for being a part of it.
All right, y'all. Y'all have a good night.
All right, you have a good night too. All right. Amanda was gonna promote her bread here at the end again, because for those of you joining later on, we started the program talking about how Amanda's been baking bread since she's been out of work, and she's really gotten into doing sourdough, and she's started actually getting people requesting loaves of bread be shipped to them. So Trisha was one of the first customers. Shanika was also one of the first customers. We have not gotten the pepperoni train yet. I don't even know about the laws in this state about putting meat inside of bread, so we'll have to check into that before we, since you alerted it to us last time, James. But thank you. Maybe that's on the horizon, some pepperoni rolls. Maybe we could just do vegan ones anyway. Then we could circumvent all that
That'd be cool.
Meat inside of bread sort of regulations.
Right.
But anyway.
It's veggie inside of bread.
Exactly, yeah, it's just veggies inside of bread. It's no different than olive loaf. But anyway, we were Amanda has a bunch of names for this new endeavor, since it's starting to really catch some traction here. Like she just went to mail the first loaves to Trisha and Shanika, and the people at the post office were all about the bread. They're like, oh, I could smell that coming in the door. Are you selling this bread? Can I buy this bread? It's like just out of the gate, trying to you know, it's the fry meme. Give me your money. Shut up and give me your money for your bread. But she's been trying to figure out a name for this whole endeavor. So we have a few, and if you all want to hang out for just a couple minutes and vote on your favorites, I'll bring them up on screen again, one by one. So just by your reactions, you know, you can just do a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, heart if you really love it or something like that, or just, you know, whatever you want to say. It's a pretty informal poll. But we'll start with the first contender, and that is occult bread, or occult bakery. Excuse me, bread theory bread. Yeah, that's a good one too. That could be a contender. Hopper cheese is good with it. That sounds good, James. So yeah, so what is your reaction to occult bakery as our first nominee? I'll let you think about that one, and then we'll bring up the second option that we've come up with. Spectral sourdough. So James says no for the occult bakery. Spectral sourdough. It's got that alliterative quality, which I always like. I know supposedly it's not done in poetry to be alliterative, but I like it. So spectral sourdough. Think about your reaction to that one. Is that memorable? Is that going to keep you okay? So maybe a little bit more warmth for that one. Then we have bedlam bread, which again, another alliteration, which it does sound nice. It's definitely something I would remember.
Right.
So
I like that one a lot.
And I think she was using a thesaurus for this one. It's hex element. I've never heard of a bakery being referred to as an element, but there you have that. You know, and it could be any combination of any of these words that we've used too. So feel free to mix and match in your responses. Hex element. Then we have phantom delights. So there's that one too. Not my personal favorite. Reminds me of like Phantom Limbs or something like that. But we are already shipping across the country. So, you know, we're shipping down to Trish and out to Shanika as well. So anywhere in the US and probably Canada, we could probably manage the postage for that. And we'll just build the shipping into the price of the bread, so you don't have to, you know, worry that it's going to be like twice the price just when you add shipping on. But we don't really have sounds like treats, that kicks. We don't really have a price point settled yet, but we're thinking probably somewhere around $9-10 for the bread itself, and then plus whatever shipping is on average, which seems like it's going to be less than $10 a loaf, if I'm remembering right what she paid for everything today. So there's Phantom Delights, and the next one is Ghost Bread. That was one of my suggestions. I just think, you know, simple, easy, something you might remember. But then it also sounds like, now thinking about it, it sounds like the ghost bed. So people might get confused which they're ordering. Maybe they think it's an addition to the ghost bed outfit. So maybe not that one. And here's my personal favorite, last but not least, Ouija bread.
I like that one a lot too.
So I'm pretty sure that no one has copyrighted the name Ouija. I think it's probably old enough that it's just kind of in the public domain now. But Ouija bread, and my thought was to print all of the bags with a Ouija board on it, and then Amanda's thought was to be able to use a hunk of bread as the planchette. So there you go. That is your choices right now. And if you have any suggestions yourself, definitely love to hear it. I'll show you right now some of the finished product. So this is a sourdough loaf that Amanda baked up just tonight. Now you can see it's just about the size of a dinner plate. So it's a pretty good size, you know. it's probably 2 or 3 pounds worth of bread there. And it's just amazing taste. Amanda's been experimenting with using kombucha in her sourdough starter, which I'd never even heard of before, but apparently she found it somewhere. And it's made the bread, the sourdough starter go faster, and I really enjoyed the taste that has come from those breads too. So we're going to continue on with that trend as well. So yeah, you know, as I said, been struggling since Amanda's been out of work, so this is just one way to kind of have some fun, share some bread with people, but then also perhaps start to help dig ourselves out of the situation we're in now. So yeah. Okay. Seems to be pretzels. Yeah, I think Amanda eventually wants to get into doing some different styles of bread, and pretzel is definitely high on the list there. I myself like pretzel buns and pretzel loaves quite a lot.
Thank you. They're delicious. I love a hamburger on a pretzel bun.
Yeah. Yeah, it just kicks it up just a little bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For sure.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that's about all I have to say tonight. Did you have any more thoughts, Trisha, on either the book or anything else that's going on, or anything at all? Any closing remarks before we wrap it up here?
Not that I can think of. It's been a long day and my caffeine's running out.
Oh, I can totally. Man, I never used to rely on caffeine, but now that I have to get up so early every day, I'm getting up at 4:50 in the morning in order to get out to work, and my body just does not agree with that decision. So I've been having to shock the old nervous system every day with caffeine. It's gotten to be a habit, a pleasant habit, but still, you know, I hate having to rely on that sort of thing. But hey, these are the realities of capitalism and wage labor. So.
Hell, I haven't even done capitalistic wage labor for others in a while, but I'm still a coffee addict. I definitely need my coffee to jumpstart my ass in the morning either way, because until I do, I'm just lagging and like rubbing sleep out of my eyes. Like, wait a minute, my brain's not fully functional yet. Jolt.
Yep, it's definitely both a blessing and a curse. Because I've really gotten into iced coffee in the past couple of years here. I never even used to be much of a coffee drinker, but then iced coffee started into it, and yeah, man, it's good, and it's actually refreshing. Yep. Unlike an ice cold glass of milk, which somehow was through the alchemy of advertising pushed as a thirst quencher. Like, has anyone in the history of mankind been super thirsty on a hot day and reached for a tall glass of just milk?
Fuck no, especially and it seems like that shit's gonna be curdling before you even finish the glass.
Right.
Even when it comes to my coffee, I make it with oat milk and dairy-free creamer because I don't want it to curdle. I want it to be just cold and refreshing and delicious.
Right on. Yeah, we've gotten into the non-dairy creamer as well. Yeah. Oh, Natalie, in case you did miss it, we were tossing around ideas for Amanda's bread company name, because she's starting to sell bread. In case you didn't see it, I'll show you some of the product again. Here it is. She's been making sourdough loaves and started to ship them out to people like Trisha and Shanika, who was on earlier. So trying to make that a little bit of a side business, and it seems to be a lot of enthusiasm for it so far. So it's good to see, and she really loves doing it too. It's one of those things you can really tell it brings her a lot of joy. So yeah. I think that'll about do it for tonight. So thank you for joining, Trisha, as always. I look forward to Wednesday. I haven't decided on what bit of theory to cover, but if anyone has any suggestions, I'm not even sure where we are in the rotation between communist and anarchist theory, but I usually like to switch back and forth. So I think the last one was Thomas Sankara, so that would be a communist text. So if anyone has any anarchist stuff or stuff that's not as easily aligned to anarchism or communism, and you want to hear a short one, it's got to be a short one, because we tend to go, 2 or 3 hours on just a half hour of text. So if it can be a half hour or less as a suggestion of some sort of short essay theory you would like to hear, let me know. Otherwise, I guess you can just be surprised and see what comes up on Wednesday. So, good night to everyone in the chat. Thank you all for participating, and hope to see you all again Wednesday. And thank you again, Trisha, for joining. Everybody have a good night. See you next time.